Welcome again to another presentation from the www.donpotter.net website. I'm going to be introducing to you a book that revolutionized my life. It's called The Hidden Story by Geraldine Rodgers, and you can read about it on my website. You can order a copy. Geraldine Rodgers was an elementary teacher for 23 years. She started out, and she makes some audacious claims in this book, which, if these claims are proven true or determined as true, could literally rock the reading establishment. She taught for 23 years. Now, her claims grow out of three things that happened, experiences in her life. First of all, her years in the classroom, 23 years in the classroom. She taught third grade for several years, and noticed, man, these kids all seem to have reading problems. They just like were guessing, and sometimes their attention seemed distracted from the text. Well, then later she went down to first grade and she taught kids phonics first, and she was amazed. Within 4 months, she would have all of her kids reading. Not only that, but they were spelling well. They were actually doing better than their third graders, and she thought, man, what's going on here? Well, so then in 1977-78, she took on a research project, testing literally thousands of students, or hundreds and hundreds of students, and she looked at how they read orally, she looked at their comprehension, and then she looked at how they were taught reading, and she came up with a tremendous discovery that there are only two kinds of readers. Now, what I want to talk about today are the concepts that she teaches in this book that helped me to become a radically better reading teacher, and to use in my own classroom with literally hundreds and hundreds of children over the last several years, since 2002 when I first read this book. She discovered there were two kinds of readers, and she looked at it, how the kids were reading, she looked at how they were taught to read, and it turns out, voila, all the good readers, really good readers, were taught to read with phonics first. Programs like the old Open Court, not the new one, but the old Open Court, and basic reading and some others. And all the kids that learned to read with sight words all had problems. And the reason is, there's only two types of readers determined by how they first began to read. This is her concept. We'll look at that in a second. But anyway, the third thing was library research. She went back and read books like Leonard P. Ayer's Measuring Scale for Reading Ability, which, by the way, had been hidden away because the information in this book would have caused a scandal if it had been well known. So she did research into reading, literally looking at thousands of reading books that had been used, and went to the public big libraries, Library of Congress, and so on. Now, let's take a look at these three concepts. The first one's the two kinds of readers. Notice I've underlined the visual. When you read, everybody's trying to get to the meaning. You always start with the word on the page. No matter how you're taught to read, the word on the page is the first thing. You can be taught to go from the word on the page straight to the meaning and get to the sound by guessing. That's the sight word method, whole word method, whole language, what's usually called balanced literacy or guided reading. On the other hand, and there's only two ways to teach reading, by the way, and they produce two different kinds of readers. You can go from the visual to the sound. That's phonics first, not phonics later, but phonics first, before anything is taught. Begun the first day in first grade, taught hot and heavy for 4 months. And you go from the visual to the meaning. If you go around the circle, the triangle this away, you produce a subjective reader that will guess the rest of their life because they've developed a reflex on the right side of the brain looking at words as wholes. If you teach a student to look at all the letters and the sounds of read from the sounds of the letters, they will become accurate, objective readers, and they will have more success getting to the meaning. But early reading psychologists felt that to get to the meaning, it would be best to go straight there. And that's all discussed in her books. The second concept is the levels of attention. There are three levels of attention. Two we're basically interested in. Those that can be automated and those that cannot. The conscious mind cannot be automated, cannot be trained. So comprehension is a skill that is basically untrainable. And I know that may shock a lot of people. But we spend a lot of time wasted trying to teach children comprehension skills that don't actually exist, and neglect the very skill of decoding that would allow them to understand what they are reading. conscious attention should not be paid to decoding. That should be automated so that attentional capacity can be conserved for attention or for meaning getting. Pressing on, the third concept that literally changed my life is the cumulative high frequency word effect. That is guessing from a context bed of memorized sight words. Somebody says, well, can people read who were taught sight words? Sure, sorta, kinda, a little bit, because they are guessing. And what makes the sight word method or the meaning method possible is the cumulative high frequency word effect, which is the fact that in any passage of text of any kind, a few words make up the majority of the text. So if those words are memorized, those high frequency words are memorized, a student can, by the use of context guessing, will be able to sort of read that text as long as you don't throw in a lot of tough words. And she discovered that in this little baby right here called A Measuring Scale for Spelling Abilities. And on page 4, Ayers lays it out. He says, and this was well known, this was published in 1915, and it was used as the basis for many of the spelling programs at that time. And then it came up missing. Ayers figured out what was 1,000 most used words in any text. And then he figured out which words, which was the most frequent word on down. And he found out, he said, let me read this if I have time. The figures inserted after each 50 words show the cumulative frequencies from the beginning. Thus, the first of these figures show 50 commonest words repeated so frequently that their repetition, with the repetition, they constitute nearly half of the words we write. The first 300 make up more than 3/4 of all writing of this kind, and 1,000 words with their repetition constitute more than 9/10 of this sort of writing. Ayers only had 1,000 words. He didn't have enough words so that they could develop a method of pure guessing that would kind of work. And so a guy named Thorndike, he started counting and he came up with 10,000 words. And then later, I think it was 30,000 words. And they finally got enough words that they would know which words to teach in first grade so that a student could read on a 4th grade level in 4th grade and still be fundamentally illiterate. And the teachers in the class don't even have a clue. And that's what's been revealed in Miss Rodger's book. Get your copy. Go to my website. I've got a lot of information on this. DonPotter.net. We did it. We did it.